It's Tuesday, the 16th of December 2014. My name is Robin Yellow, and this is Ecotastic. And with me is Mr. Kit Knowles from the windy north of England in Manchester. How are you doing, Kit?
Very good. Good evening, everyone.
Hi, Kit. Thanks for joining. And with us, you'll have noticed a face lurking down in the bottom of the screen, and that's Dave Allbeury, who's joining us. He's a builder and construction expert, just built an eco home in Surrey. Good to have you on the show, Dave. December 2014. My name's Robin Yellow.
Good evening, all.
Indeed, good evening. And we're going to be talking about your build project. Particularly, we're going to be focusing this week on swimming pools, because that came up last week. Humidity, swimming pools, and the equipment that you've got. And you've shared some pictures with us, which we're going to have a look at together. And will you stay with us during the news segment, Dave, and give us your insights?
Yeah, love to.
Brilliant. And from the pre-show, Dave and I were saying we seem to agree on quite a few things about Greenbelt, so hopefully there'll be a bit of a punch-up this week. So watch out, Kit.
Oh yeah, the north-south divide, or is it just the Surrey and everywhere else divide? We'll get into it.
Yeah, that's right. Here we go. Okay, well, let's start this week with the news. The Telegraph reported this week that green policies add up to 40% to the cost of household electricity. Official figures, initially withheld by ministers according to the Telegraph, show an alarming increase in the price of electricity, caused by generous subsidies to wind farms as well as other policies. Now, an average household is expected to pay as much as £250 more for electricity, mainly through consumer subsidies, to pay for the government's green energy schemes, while an electrically heated house could cost as much as £440 a year worse off. Well, anyone that heats their house with electricity has literally got money to burn. But these green schemes, Kit, you've talked about them before.
Yeah, I mean, you're saying this is recent, and it's 14th of December. You're saying this is coming out on. I mean, I don't know if this is talking about a rise on of 40% on the last statistics we were looking at. As far as I'm aware, the current figures are sort of bulk electricity is 15.5 pence per kilowatt hour, and when we're talking about green subsidies, I think that makes up about 1.6 billion in taxpayers per year. Whereas if you're looking at petrochemical subsidies, it was 6.4 billion a year. And when you look at the new fracking side of things, I think that's pegged to add another 1.6 billion a year. So there's going to be just as much money going into fracking as there is into all of the green subsidies. So if you ask me, I have no idea what they're talking about, where they're getting this stuff from. The reality is that electricity is going up in price because, of course, it's on the basis of all sorts of other fuel and energy strapped elements, which is increasing price year on year, and it won't stop.
No, it won't stop, but as for the subsidies themselves, of course, we need subsidies for green tech to stimulate green industry and sustainable energy for the future. Therefore, with anything you're investing for the future, you're putting more money in now. Does the public have the right to be aggrieved at this, Kit?
Well, of course they have the right, it's their money, but my point being that if I don't think that the green subsidies would even be required if it wasn't for the massive tax breaks that the petrochemical industry benefit from. If you were to strip everything back to a level basis and see what occurs at that point, that would be really exciting, because I mean the fact is that oil is getting much more difficult to find, much more difficult to exploit, and we're getting much more desperate, returning to more sort of unconventional sources like the gas fracking and deep sea work along with tar sands. So all these sorts of elements is what wind turbines, PV, wave, hydro, all these other elements are competing against, and actually I think that they are massively cost beneficial on a level basis.
Dave, I don't suppose you heat your house with electricity, do you?
No, my mother's house, which I inherited, is heated with electricity, and it's fearsomely expensive. We just have night stores, and I'm shocked by how much it costs. But no, my house is heated with gas.
Heated with gas, that's Kit's favourite fuel. Okay, let's move on. Let's move on. The Guardian reported this week, Apple Campus 2, is it the greenest building on the planet? Now, Apple are claiming that its California campus will be the greenest building on the planet, but the performance data doesn't stack up. Now, it's an absolutely beautiful building. For those of you who haven't seen it, I'll just pop it up on the screen. You can see it looks like this futuristic glass and steel spaceship in a kind of green area, and it's got wonderful technology in there for capturing, being water efficient, being energy efficient, with high levels of aesthetics, like a beauty queen who can do higher math, according to a person called Yuddleston, who together with German architect and critic and Professor Ulf Meyer asked hundreds of owners of the highest rated new green buildings around the globe to reveal their performance data so that they could compare it. And in an interesting twist to the story, there is a list here which the Guardian have thoughtfully compiled of the 10 buildings which claim to be the world's greenest and most sustainable, and one of them is in Manchester, One Angel Square. The cooperative group's new head office in Manchester has declared itself the most environmentally friendly building in the world. But competitions to be the most green building aside, green buildings seem to be very more common than not green buildings these days in the commercial sector, Kit.
Yeah, I think the first thing that you've got to understand with all these claims is that on what basis are you the greenest? So if you actually go to the one based in Manchester, you'll find that it's all based on sort of the BREEAM scale. And BREEAM is one of several different ways of trying to judge how green a building is. The one thing that isn't released almost anywhere as any part of this is the kind of the post-occupancy based works. They do everything on a kind of a modelled basis, and that's something I have a massive issue with in terms of actual performance, relating very poorly to pretty much any modelled performance in the vast majority of cases. So to claim you're the greenest building in Europe based on having the highest BREEAM, the likelihood is that you'll have a pretty impressive building there, but it won't necessarily, if you look at what we call the display performance certificate, the DPC, you won't necessarily be actually all that eco. Look at all that lighting that's going on in there. You know, if you work it out on a sort of a pound per square meter paid, I suspect that will be quite high. You'll have a bunch of sort of banking types that will likely not give a crap about their usage. So occupancy plays a big part, especially when you've got such a highly sort of a high occupancy density for these larger office buildings. So I would like to see...
It's interesting, this one here, the Crystal in London, is referred to as one of the world's greenest buildings.
Yeah, it's all vaguisms, it's all generic sort of titles. It doesn't actually mean anything. The greenest buildings are those that use the sort of the least energy and produce the least waste, and most of these modelled systems are not actually doing a great job of reducing all of that.
Interesting. And let's move on to a story, one of my favourite stories of the week, which is from BD Online. Oxford looks at building on Greenbelt. City Council are to review protected land after a report highlights a shortfall in supply for new homes. Now, council planners have warned that following a publication of this report, which shows availability of sites in the city will only be able to deliver as little as a third of future housing need, the assessment, which was carried out by consultants URS for the City Council, said that deliverable sites across the city will only be able to provide 30 to 40% of new homes. And it says that in order to be sustainable, available, and achievable, it needs 6,400 new homes by 2031. Now here, the reason for Greenbelt, of course, is to keep that green belt around the city and to have clear lines of delineation, as we spoke about on the last show. But clearly, Oxford is outgrowing the amount of land that it's got, Kit.
Yeah, again, there's two drivers here. One is that these guys need more homes, but the way to achieve that, on one hand, could be going out towards the green belt, and the other way is to reduce the kind of square meterage per person within Oxford. So this is something that's happening in London in a big way. It's becoming so economical to do so that people are actually taking properties and splitting them down, and this is one of the best ways to achieve our housing requirements, is not just to focus on the new builds, but also the existing built environment. So what you might find is that if the prices in Oxford start to increase anymore, people are going to start breaking them down. They're going to start getting multiple flats or multiple dwellings out of individual buildings, and you're going to find that the density of Oxford goes up, and that's actually a fantastic thing, because firstly, there's almost no waste that comes from doing so. Secondly, everybody's carbon emissions per person goes down dramatically on doing so, because obviously you've got less space per person having to be heated. It's effectively a fantastically more efficient system, and by not having to build a load of new builds, we can still maintain a green belt all in there. So I think that that legislation should be coming out to enable us or benefit people who want to split dwellings down for multiple occupancy. I think that is the ultimate way forward for sort of the urban environment. It's amazing where I live that how many people, you know, it's quite a sort of an OAP area, but I'd say about 40% of houses have a single occupant in a big 4 or 5 bed house. That's
well,
the sort of thing.
in the pre-show we were talking about this, and in fact, Dave, you made a comment on the YouTube channel last week on the show, thank you very much for that, where you agreed with my position on green belts, which is to build into them.
Yes, I do. There are scenarios locally. Perhaps you will know Harriet's Lane, which is just down the road from you, Robin. Part of the gardens in Harriet's Lane are in Greenbelt, not all of them, but part of the gardens. And an application was put in for a new house in one of these gardens, quite in line with the rest of the properties, but it was refused both locally and at appeal on the basis that the perception from the Greenbelt would be impaired. Now, the green belt beyond Harriet's Lane is the M25. So the problem is that the green belt is enforced so rigidly that it gives you no scope to develop on quite suitable land, just because it is the green belt and inviolable.
Well, there was a challenge a few years ago to say whether actually Britain's planning laws were illegal under EU human rights legislation. Who's to say that somebody sitting in Dorking or Cheadle-Hulme or Manchester or anywhere should decide what you can and can't do? But I think you're right. I mean, it's a shortcut to saying no. Just call it the green belt and stop it. And that's the issue I've got with it, not being intelligent about it. The city of Oxford is growing beyond its boundary, and why not push out? I mean, I've been to Oxford. You've got city and then you've got green, and there's nothing going on. Low-level farming is going on there. Why not build some estates in there? Why does it have to be that we have to wait until something's declared a garden city before we get any significant development?
What about the possibility of using it? I mean, it's obviously a desperate need for a lot of people wanting to develop the green belt. Why can't we use that as an opportunity, as you say, intelligently to develop that in terms of putting higher standards, higher legislative requirements to achieve these sorts of things? It might be a benefit going forward, and you could be forced to do it under the premise of sort of cooperatives or other community-based systems. My issue is who lobbies for it, who benefits from it, where the money goes. My issue is also on the basis of an uneven country, on the basis that we could share that wealth, we could share that diversity, we'd become a much stronger, much more powerful country, both economically and within ourselves, if we could spread the wealth, literally, if we could diversify away from a sort of a London-centric environment. I think this is exactly what's happening right now. We're seeing sort of a mass exodus, even sort of within my friendship group. I'm finding that a huge number of folk coming back towards Manchester on the basis that it's simply too expensive to live in London, and I really enjoy that. I think Manchester's getting a big boost from it. I've had literally in the last 12 months sort of 4 or 5 out of my closest sort of 20 friends moved back to Manchester, all of which were in London.
But then the pain that you've got, what you're saying is, if you have pain, you constrain a behaviour. If you've got a green belt, then you get more brownfield development. If you've got heat in one room, everybody will go to that one room, and then the world will be a better place. One of the arguments, and help me out here, Dave, was that of course it is cheaper to, and you've been in the property development game yourself, it's cheaper to build greenfield than brownfield.
Yes, it is cheaper. The remediation costs are much lower on greenbelt land, but it doesn't have to be a pristine wood or anywhere that Bambi lives or that sort of thing. There's plenty of sustainable development land, again, locally. There's a big field adjacent to the M25. You could drop affordable housing onto that. You could get probably 40 or 50 houses onto that field. Serves no purpose as it stands other than being in greenbelt.
Although the exact same argument could be made for brown belt, in that it's all too easy to give the example of some kind of disused petrol station with all sorts of chemical remediation requiring, whereas at the same time, particularly in London, people are starting to build down towards rail sides. They're using the banks along public transport. They're using corner plots on the ends of sort of terrace. They're filling in gaps between terrace houses. All of these are examples of perfectly sustainable brown belt sort of developments. And in those cases there is no remediation, no expensive remediation involved at all. So I think there's still plenty that can be pushed in the brown belt. London and Paris are two of the most innovative countries when it comes to doing that sort of development. Particularly Paris is taking it to some serious extremes with some. They're taking double. There's this entire area of Paris which is just riddled with double garages, and they're developing these incredible buildings where you've effectively got one large room, which is this this double garage all knocked into a single room, and the spaces within it move, they change. So your kitchen becomes the whole room, and then things change, and then the whole room's a bedroom, or the whole room's a lounge. So you can get these very large, very spacious, very sexy spaces through a house that morphs around you. And this is just another example of innovation that's being driven by this urban density, which you guys are so keen to kind of dilute.
No,
Indeed we are. And oh no, Dave wanted. What did you want to say there, Dave? Excuse me for talking over you.
I don't think the two are necessarily mutually exclusive. I'm all for developing the odd nooks and crannies in town. I think that's great. I've done it myself, but it's not going to supply the number of homes we need for all the people that are coming to London, and they are still coming to London. It has always grown. Chelsea used to be Fields ages ago. It will continue to grow because that's where people want to come.
What do you think about my idea of sort of diluting the legislation around multiple occupancy within existing dwellings?
No, I think that's a good idea. It has its risks in that a lot of nice Georgian buildings will be hacked to bits, and only the facade will remain, and all the interesting character inside the building will disappear. But carefully done, yeah, don't have a problem with it.
Yeah. Great.
Okay, well, let's move on. Thanks for that, guys. Good discussion. One final news article before we move on to some really interesting stuff in Kit's Tech Corner, and we're going to be taking a look at some stuff in Dave's house, which will be fun. The Green Deal, the £24 million Green Deal fund, has been exhausted in a day. The solid wall insulation element of the £30 million home improvement fund closed, and consumers can still apply for other parts of the deal, but the pot, the £24 million pot for solid wall insulation, has evaporated in a day following a rush of applications. Now, Kit, you said last time it's free money, just go and apply for it.
Yeah, I mean, you'll notice that these kind of this is exactly what it's been done for. This the Home Improvement Fund, as it's called. The reason it's there is because it's bringing a really positive spotlight on the Green Deal, which has effectively been a massive flop. And obviously, the reason it's so successful is because it's grant basis, not loan basis. So it's a completely different deal. And as green as they name it, it may not be in nature. That's one thing to note. You'll see there the Twickenham home that's having its insulation applied to the side of it. That insulation is a non-breathable form of insulation, and you'll notice at the top of that insulation that they've not extended the roof line. This is an absolute classic. So they get these aluminium profiles that clip over the top that go up to the ridge line and back down. And what you find with these sorts of things is nothing flashes in properly. The water that drips off the roof goes down the back of that aluminium profile, and you get all sorts of sort of damp ingress. And then because you've got this non-breathable insulation strapped to a period property, that basically presents as black spot mold on the interior, increasing humidities and all the other sort of issues related to moisture and sick building syndrome. So there's a lot of risks, and there's a lot of mistakes being made, and they're being made fast. The other point being that all of this is absorbed by just one or two companies. British Gas, of note, is the kind of the they last time they swallowed 80% of the 100 million that was released last time. Now, this time the government took one step to go a bit better, in that they took the 100 million and they split it down to 3 releases. I think it was 30 million, 30 million, and 40 million. But even you can see they've released it then at 30 million, and it's now gone basically, and it happened almost immediately. So it doesn't change anything. In fact, all it does by staggering it is give British Gas more time to sort of bank up all of these orders and then get them ready to crash the system as soon as it's available. I think it's a very flawed way to go, but at least it's a grant, so people are taking it on without having to take on more debt, which I like.
Great, thank you for that, Kit. Now I want to move into Kit's Tech Corner, and this week we're going to be looking at swimming pools again, which is a great topic for a green eco show. But if you're going to have a swimming pool, make sure you do it the way Dave Allbeury has done it. Dave, can you share with us a little insight into your pool setup, and I'll share some images on the screen. If you can talk to them, that'd be really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. The pool we've put in is provided by Polypool, and they supply sectional panels which are insulated. They're about 125 mil thick, and they give a U value of about 0.18, which is not great, but it's better than nothing. And if you put in an insulated floor as well, and then cover it with a pool cover, you can maintain 30-degree temperatures quite comfortably off a simple gas boiler that runs through a heat star Andromeda unit, which transfers the heat from the boiler into the pool, and then also deals with the air handling as well. So it'll extract damp air from the pool room and then take the water out of that and recycle the air back into the room, usually by the windows, to keep them clear.
Right. And this is it here. And this is Polypipe, you say?
Polypool is the company.
Polypool. Is this the one?
I can't see it on my screens.
Okay, right. I've just pulled the Polypool Co.uk website.
Yeah, that'll be it.
Great. Now here we've got the Heat Star Andromeda. I'll flash that up on the screen. Tell me what this is.
That's basically the unit which transfers the heat from a gas boiler or any other source into the pool. So the supply comes into the heat star, is transferred just by a normal radiator type effort inside it, and then returns back to the boiler. So a very simple heat exchanger, really.
Now, last week Kit was saying that humidity is a problem with indoor pools. Has that been a problem for you?
Not so far, no. It's a highly insulated room, and apart from the windows, which are obviously the weak point, which are only double glazed and with Kit's favourite aluminium frames, it's an issue if it's open for 3/4 of an hour with kids jumping around in it, but with a couple of adults using it 10-15 minutes a day, not a problem at all. Don't even turn the air handling part of it on.
That's interesting. What have you got to say for yourself now, Kit?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as with all these sorts of technologies, it's very much dependent upon occupancy usage. I think a lot of what you might be seeing, the air handling unit that Dave's got there it's not humidistat controlled; it's sort of manual operation, and so what you actually find is that you get quite high spikes in relative humidity without the condensation immediately presenting itself on windows. Again, for you to be seeing water streaming down a window, it isn't just that you've got high humidities, you've had to have maintained it for quite a long time. The process of nucleation is quite slow. So you are probably spiking your humidities in those areas, and that humidity needs to go somewhere. And so what you tend to find is as you move throughout the space that this humidity spreads throughout properties, and you find this has quite a few knock-on effects actually with regards to building health and occupancy health, where there's some really interesting studies that look at things like viruses and bacteria, fungus, rhinitis, asthma, ozone production, chemical interaction, and many other sort of pathogens and conditions that affect humans. And you find that all of those are actually directly controlled. Very strangely, Mother Nature has got them under her thumb under a relative humidity index, in that if you have very low relative humidity or very high relative humidity, it exacerbates those issues. So having a control on humidity is a really important element, and so what we're normally trying to do with our systems when we're designing this, especially when we're dealing with MVHR and other ventilation systems, we basically need to be very careful to control humidity throughout the property, and this sort of pool generation of humidity is an issue, and we like to handle it locally rather than let it kind of spread out and sort of raise the base level of relative humidity throughout. So I don't know if that's helped at all, but it's kind of complicated situation. Somebody's pinging me.
Somebody's phone's going off there. You'll be taken outside and shot afterwards, Dave. But
I think this is me.
Is it? Oh, it's you, Kit. Is it? It's an outrage.
Sorry.
Dave, could you just explain U value to the viewers and listeners?
Yes, it's an indication of insulation levels. The Kit will probably be much better on this than I am. The Americans use R values and we use U values, and the lower the U value, the better the heat retention is.
And in the case of your pool, you were saying that it had a U value of what? Was it 0.28?
0.18 for panels. So, yeah, I mean, there'll be a loss through the pool cover itself, which would be probably a little higher. But out of interest, I ran some figures just to see how much we actually spend on gas and electricity to run the whole house over a period of a year. And we spend 2,600 on gas, we spend 960 odd on electricity, and we get back just over 1,900 from our PV arrays. So that covers heating, cooking, and dealing with the pool.
And of course, you get that money back in such large amounts because you signed up your PV array when the subsidy was very high, didn't you?
Yeah, we've got two arrays, one integrated, one which Solar Century provided just because it was visually quite obvious in the house, and the other one is just an on-roof array which nobody can see, so it just sits on top of the roof.
Great. We should do, Kit, you and I should do, we should get Dave back and actually do PVs another time, maybe when the sun comes out in March next year, something like that, because that's a show in itself, isn't it?
There's loads of that. I mean, there's so much new PV tech coming on board as well, and I love how PV is going to fit in well with energy management systems and other bits and bobs as well. So there's, yeah, plenty, multiple shows worth.
Great, and if you could throw that phone onto the sofa behind you. Let's move on now. Thank you so much for that, Dave. Let's just a couple of quick things to look at here. What are we looking at here? Polysolar, Kit, briefly.
Wow, this is again. Well, this is actually, I guess, leading on to that show. This is a PV technology. What I was doing by showing this was it's kind of interesting because this is coming out of the world of sort of plant growth. So this is focusing on sort of optimizing the wavelengths coming into a greenhouse for plant growth, but at the same time it's developed to generate electricity. It's not exactly a high efficiency system, but it is a rather nice option for your greenhouse if you wanted to grow something or create an outdoor space. And you also, this is very suitable for people who aren't able to mount PV panels on their roof because of some conservation order or other. The beauty of putting it on a remote dwelling such as a greenhouse is that you can orientate that better, you can often situate it better, you can get more optimal sort of solar collection as well, and at the same time sort of grow plenty of plants under it. So it's that green thumb, that green finger type of well, I don't know, incentive. I like it. What do you think?
Yeah, sounds good to me. I like the idea. You don't lose any light through to the plants.
No, the only light that it takes out, this is the clever bit, is it takes out the section for the PV, which it needs that part of the spectrum to generate the energy from, and leaves the rest of it, which is actually what the plants need. So it's optimizing the conditions in there for plant growth.
Superb.
Well, talking of plant growth, I want to share this article from Tree Hugger with you about plant your kitchen garden in your kitchen with your this countertop LED grow unit. Now this here, sorry, counter crop. I misread that in the pre-show as well. Now down here you can see it sitting on top of the counter. These lights mimic the kind of 24-hour cycle of light that a plant would experience outside in the height of summer, and take advantage of the very high efficiency of LEDs to provide everything that a plant wants. It does look a little bit like a cannabis factory, but what do you think of this, Kit and Dave?
Wow, it's a piece of plastic. Why don't you go put your plants out in that greenhouse we've just discussed? You're going to get much better growth if you can get it outdoors. I mean, this is suitable, I guess, for areas like flats and urban environments. I think that might have some benefit, but it's going to be a bloody expensive method of growing your greens, because of course it's running off electricity, even if it is LEDs. I don't know. I think it's a fad, Robin.
It could well be a fad, and but you know, if you haven't got room to grow your spinach or broccoli or whatever you want in your back garden, it's it's what they're saying in here in this counter crop system will grow stuff much faster, and it's a Kickstarter campaign here where they're looking for backers. I guess we'll slated for delivery in May 2015. I've never seen a Kickstarter campaign deliver on its time promise, but yeah, as you're right, it may well be a fad. But look, there's an app, so it's got to be good, hasn't it?
The plants are also quite sensitive to the colour temperature that they get, and I'm not sure LEDs would provide that. And also the actual output of LEDs, I'm not totally sure would suit plants, because they used to use sodium lights and then switch to another high energy light source. So I'd be interested to see the tech on that.
So would I, and on that note, I'd be interested to see the tech on that, which is certainly a phrase I like to hear. I'm going to wrap up this show. Dave, it's been fantastic to have you on board. A real pleasure. Thank you for those insights. Will you come back?
I'd love to. It's been a pleasure talking with you, serious gentlemen.
Well, less of the serious gentleman, maybe. Certainly don't put me into that group.
Gentlemen.
Yeah, one clown, one scientist. That sounds good.
Kit, thank you so much for your contribution this week, as always.
Yeah, no worries. Absolutely love it. Back next week, I'm guessing.
Of course, we're back next week. Next week is the day before Christmas Eve, so we're going to have a little post show about that, and look out for next week's show. It may be coming or it may not. We'll have to see. I would like to do it if you're around.
Well, thinking about it, that is also my wife's D-Day. That is the baby birth.
Well, look, that could bring some excitement to the show. You might have to break off halfway through and grab a bag. That'd be awesome.
Rush to the hospital.
Yeah, I think that would add a touch of drama to the show. But guys, thank you very much, and to you out there, remember you can contribute to the stories that we talk about on our subreddit, ecotastic.reddit.com. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like us. Otherwise, we will see you next week. Look out for the show in your Google Plus events, if you want to, your Hangouts on Air events. And we'll see you then. And thank you again, Dave. Thanks, Kit. And that's it for this week.